Hi, I'm Kraeger, and I'm going to demonstrate some simple watercolor and drawing techniques to help you create an illustrated journal. So these are the Strathmore 400 series journals. I will be using these journals for the techniques I'm going to show you today. They come in hard bound like this one and soft bound like this one, and they open completely flat so you can write across the spine and work on the whole page. Really versatile. I really like them. If you prefer individual sheets, the Strathmore Skills 200 series watercolor paper is a great choice. I will also be using pencils. I prefer a mechanical pencil because it can always be sharp, but there is nothing wrong with a good old number 2. They even work when they're dull. I also use permanent pens. They won't bleed if you paint watercolor over them, but make sure it says permanent. I use a lightweight palette that fits in my purse. You can use any kinds of watercolor you like. There is no wrong way to do this. But because I am going to make a color wheel, I'm going to the art supply store to choose my colors to squeeze into my plastic palette. When you go to the art supply store, there is an overwhelming amount of grades, brands, and colors to choose from. I recommend buying artist grade pigments because the color is richer. There is a higher ratio of pigment in artist grade. That's the actual color part compared to the binder that holds the pigment together on your paper. The brand and color choices are more personal, and it is very easy to get carried away. I know this because it happens to me almost every time I come into this store. But today I know I am going to make a color wheel, so I am going to focus on the primary colors, red, yellow, and blue. The color names and brands don't matter to me as much as how they will mix to make the secondary colors, orange, purple, and green. I learned the hard way, in front of a bunch of students, that red and blue don't always make purple. So after a little research, I figured out the best way to make a great purple is to choose a red that has a purple bias and mix it with a blue that has a purple bias. So now, when I choose my primaries, I choose 2 of each primary with a bias towards the secondary colors I am mixing. 1 orangish red, 1 purplish red, 1 orangish yellow, 1 greenish yellow, and 1 greenish blue, and 1 purplish blue. I'll pick up a couple of brushes while I'm here. I use synthetic brushes. They are reasonable and hold a fair amount of paint and come to a good point. I'm also going to get a water brush. They come in different sizes, but my favorite is the large. These are great to carry in my purse as you add the water to the barrel of the brush. And here is the Strathmore 400 series journal that will also fit into my purse. Now I'm ready to go back to the studio and make my color wheel. I'm starting by adding dots where I'm going to put my pigments. I'm going to put my orangey red and my purpley red. I'm using the pigment straight out of the tube. That's my purpley blue. And my greeny blue, and the same with my yellows, my orangey yellow closest to the orangey red, and my greenish yellow closest to the greenish blue. Now I'm going to add just water and spread those pigments out, and I'll mix them together where the orange will go, cleaning my brush thoroughly in between. A nice orange. Clean my brush again. Make sure I get all the pigment out of there. Blot it a little bit. And I'll come around and mix my green using the greeny yellow. You can really see the difference between the 2 yellows. Cleaning the brush and make that orangey yellow a bigger circle. pull my greeny blue out. That's a pretty color. And mix the two together in there and get a green. Spread out my blue so you can see the color. That's my purpley blue. I did clean my brush in between there. Cleaning it again to spread my purplish red. And this time I know I'm going to get purple. I learned the hard way how to make a nice purple. Now I'm going to mix some neutral colors, and I'm going to mix across the color wheel, directly across. So I'm going to mix my purple with my yellows, either one of them, and my reds with my greens, and my oranges with my blues. That's the key to getting neutral colors. I'm going to mix that purple with either one of the yellows, and in this case I'm going to just lift a little from both yellows, cleaning my brush so I don't contaminate my yellow, and cleaning again. And then I'll mix them together and you see I get a nice neutral color. I'll do the same with the reds and the greens, and again with the oranges and the blues, and I end up with those nice neutral colors in the middle of my wheel. The next thing I'm going to do is to put these colors to use, and I'm going to make some even washes. But before I do that, I'm going to show you how to make some straight-ish lines. You never know when you're going to want to put a headline on your page or write some text. So as you can see, I'm making some dots, and then I'll do a little air drawing of the line across, and then put my pencil down and draw. That gives me some guidelines later to write on my journal page. And now I'm going to do a box to fill with a wash. So I put my top guideline down, and then I'm going to put a vertical guideline down, estimate on each side, and go across, and then I can do my vertical lines. And now I have a box that I can fill with a wash. I'm going to use my number 10 brush, and I'm going to mix a puddle of paint. And it doesn't matter which of those primary colors you use, or any color from any one of your watercolors. I'm going to use the greenish blue there. I'm adding plenty of water. I want to make sure I have enough water so that I can mix a puddle to fill my box. Don't want to stop in the middle and mix more. So the amount of pigment in the puddle will determine how dark your wash will be. I always figure I can start light, can always go darker after it's dry by doing it again. And now I have my paper towel at the ready. I am going to let gravity be my friend and help me, and I load my brush. I keep loading my brush often, and I get that bead across there. The bead is the most important thing, and the biggest mistake our first-time wash makers do when they're in our classes in watercolor journaling is they don't load their brush often enough. It's that wet edge that keeps our wash even. So I want to keep pulling that bead down as I go, keeping that wet edge, and reloading my brush more than I think I need to. It's the worst that can happen. It'll drip. Oh well, we strive for imperfection. So I move that bead down, and when I get to the end, I will suck it up with my brush. And I'll dry my brush out to do that, grabbing my paper towel, keeping the verticalness on the page there, blotting my brush, and I'll use it like a sponge to suck the extra bead that I don't want now out at the bottom. Watercolor flows from greater to lesser wetness. So my brush is less wet and the pigment flows into it. I'm going to make another wash using the water brush. The difference with this is I just squeeze the brush and the water flows out into the palette. I add the pigment the same way, and pretty much everything else is the same. I'll put in some quick pencil lines for my box, my straight-ish pencil lines. And now when I do my wash, I use the water brush the same way I was using the round number 10 brush, using the whole side of the brush and not squeezing it, but reloading it and dragging that bead down, keeping that bead going the same exact way, being very careful not to squeeze the brush now. Now I will blot the brush and use it to suck up the bead just like I used the number 10 brush. Works just the same. I'm going to use the water brush to make 2 more washes, but first I have to clean it. And I do that by squeezing and blotting it on the paper towel until I see no more color. And I'm going to make a gradient wash next. So I start the same way. This will make a good sky. And now I'm squeezing just plain water as mixed with the pigment that's already on the brush. And that'll make the wash lighter as it pulls down the bead. This is a good thing to use for a sky. The sky always gets lighter towards the horizon. My next wash will be a 2-color wash. I'm adding just a little more pigment there for just make it a little darker. Now I'm blotting and I'm going to suck up some of that bead, but it's still wet. And then I'm going to add my orange, good sunset color, and bring that bead down. It's really good and wet, but the water brush will still work to suck that bead up. As long as I blot it carefully, I'm able to easily suck that bead up. I'm going to put those washes to work by creating a landscape. And what better landscape than the one I can see out my window right off my deck. I'll do the sky first, doing a gradient wash. I'm going to paint things over it, but I first have to let it dry. Now I'm going to paint the ocean next, right over the top of the dry sky. Another wash, bringing it down. I'll paint more things over the top. As long as I let it dry in between, it's fine. Next comes the Monterey Peninsula, which is way off in the distance, and that needs to be a very light purple. Since it's so far away, a lot of atmosphere between it and me. I'm being careful not to get the purple of the peninsula in the ocean here. And the next layer I do, after I let this dry, will be my trees. My background trees, the farthest ridge away from me. And I'm using the brush to suggest the tree shapes. I'm using the point of the brush and sort of pulling it down. And I'll do that all the way across the ridge. And then I'll fill it in, continuing to use the vertical strokes. And that, because the trees are vertical up and down, that gives a nice suggestion of trees. Now that my background ridge is dry, I can mix up some darker pigment and do the closer ridge. And I'll still use the vertical up and down strokes for the trees. If any of the lighter green from the background ridge shows through, there's nothing wrong with that. It adds some interest, and it's not all one exact flat color of green out there. Because this ridge is closer, I can see a little more detail on these trees. So I'll add a little more detail. Maybe I can see some branches across. Some of the tree branches I can see. So I'll add that in at this stage. I'm still leaving the space in the front for the lighter lemon trees. I can paint a lighter green over the leftover sky down there. Now I'm going to let it dry. And if you're impatient, there's a few things you can do. You can put it out in the sun. You can put it next to a heater vent, or you can use a hairdryer. These things all speed up the drying process. Now that it is dry, I'm going to do the foreground trees, and again I'm mixing a little more pigment in my already existing puddle to make it darker. The foreground trees come up above the ridge of that mountain there. Because these trees are closer, I can see a lot more detail. I can also see sky and the background behind the tree, so I'll leave some spaces. Still leaving at the bottom there my space for my lemon trees in the foreground. My oak trees are a little warmer in their color of green, so I'll add a little yellow there. A little warmer in color than the darker bluey green redwood trees. And those oak trees I can just cover up that ridge. Now there's another tall tree on the left-hand side of the page. And that redwood tree, its branches sort of curve upward. Make the branches first and then add the foliage on them. I like to let a little of the background show through my foliage and my branches. And I also like to let the trees sort of pop out of the box I made of the sky and the ocean and the background ridges. I'll add the light color on the foreground lemon trees here and let that dry. And now I can, as long as it's dry, I can get in there with some darker colors which really make those foreground trees just pop. Add some more detail in the branches, getting darker. Add some shading at the bottom of the lemon trees. As I get closer to the foreground, I can get darker and more detailed. The next thing I'm going to do is add some spatter. It's a quick way to add some detail, and I'm protecting my background by just putting scrap pieces of paper down. And then I load my brush. I'm using purple. I love purple. And I tap it over the area I'm spattering. I'm going to mix up some brown for my trunks, and I'm going to mix my red with my green. I think I'll warm it up with a little yellow. But mixing across the color wheel to get my browns. And some final spatter. And I think I am about done. Just clean up a little of that spatter, a little final detail, and I'm done. Thanks for joining me. Next week we'll do a couple of different drawing techniques, and then I'll show you some of Illustrated Watercolor Journaling's really fun machines, different ways to add texture to your page. We'll see you then.